today. We will be recording this webinar and you'll get a link afterwards. We're just going to spend the first few minutes introducing our panelists and then start the discussion around database and the DevOps. But we really want to make this as interactive as possible. So please use your GoToWebinar panel and ask questions anytime throughout, anything that's on your mind about DevOps and the database. And we'll try to interject them throughout today's webinar so we can answer your questions. And then at the end, we'll have the demo of the DLM automation suite. So James, thank you so much for joining us today. James is a consultant and evangelist at DevOps Guys. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, I'm from a dev background, I suppose you could say, more or less a continuous integration and CI background, and now I'm working as one of the consultants, I suppose, or DevOps evangelist we call ourselves, or a DevOps unicorn, as I call myself, and we help organizations on their DevOps journey. So people come to us and asking how they can get on that DevOps transformation, and we go in and have a look at the organization, assess their constraints, their enablers, and try and put them on the path to DevOps enlightenment, if you will.
It's a hard journey, right?
It definitely can be.
And you're also a Redgate certified partner in DLM?
Yes, indeed, and we also get involved in delivering training and education across the Redgate suite, as well as doing education and training on DevOps as a subject, really.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. We also have our very own Grant Fritchie, our scary DBA, who's not really that scary. Grant, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Sorry about that. Well, like I says, my name's Grant Fritchie. I'm the scary DBA, and I've been working for Redgate Software for coming up on 5 years. And before that, I did 10 years as a DBA for an insurance company, as well as DBAs in other organizations, and developer, actually. My whole thing about DevOps is that I always feel like I've been doing DevOps to a degree, because coming out of a development role and then moving into the database role, you don't get the same, I've never had that antagonism with my development teams per se, although I had plenty of fights with development teams. Every time they asked for SA privileges, that's how I earned the scary DBA moniker. It's, I don't know, I've really enjoyed working in and around DevOps for the last several years, and just the realization that to a degree we've been doing that kind of stuff all along. It's just putting a tag on it and then putting some good infrastructure and discipline around, making sure that you've got the right processes in place to support fast, accurate development. And I love it. So. And yeah, and I speak on this topic, obviously, written articles. I'm working on a book right now on DLM, on database lifecycle management, and the whole DevOps thing. And the chapter I'm getting ready to start is on CI. So, it's a topic near and dear to my heart. And yeah, I can't think of anything else to say.
Well, that's different. Grant can't think of anything to say. Great, thank you. So today we're going to talk about where is the database in DevOps. And I think to get started, I think we just need to explain what is DevOps. So James, as the DevOps consultant and evangelist, can you clarify this for us?
On the spot. Right, yeah, so here goes the hour. What is DevOps? So, yeah, it's great to try and get that right in the outset as well, because one of the problems with DevOps at the moment is there is just a lack of clarity about what it is, and there's a misconception that it is just about automation. So we hear people using the term DevOps almost interchangeably with automation, or even tooling to some degree, and that's very worrying, because DevOps patently isn't about tooling. It's in fact about the almost complete opposite. It's the side of the spectrum. It's about the culture. It's about creating the right environment, the right kind of team to become collaborative and work towards a shared goal of delivering software effectively. And that's not just about tooling, it's not just about automation. Automations help you achieve that, but DevOps is that environment. So it's more about getting the right people in the right place at the right time, getting them to work collaboratively towards that shared goal. That's the DevOps ethos, that's the DevOps mindset. The tools are enablers. And really they're not, they are enablers, they're also accelerators. They're a great way in as well. And we can learn a lot from our tools as well. So there are now some tools out there on the market that can teach us how to do these things effectively. But yeah, ultimately DevOps is about that environment, that culture, that collaborative working process.
I think that's one of the clearest definitions I've ever heard. Thank you. Grant, anything to add there?
No, I mean, the tenets of DevOps are pretty well published. It's just that they're hard to get people to buy into. I've heard, and I've had these conversations with developers many times, that DevOps means that developers are taking over operations, and it's well, gosh, guys, one,
I like that.
Cool, it's yours, have fun. By the way, here's the phone that you're going to get paged at 3 a.m. because now that you're in charge of it, I don't get called anymore, and that's great. But no, seriously, it's DevOps is about cooperation. It's about finding eliminate the bridge, eliminate the wall, eliminate the gaps between the different groups, the SAN admins and the DBAs and the developers and the business people, everybody, arrive at this place where we're working cooperatively. We're doing the business of delivering the software that we need to do our business, right? It's just all got to get back to, helping the business make money so we get a paycheck and go home. Not, I've got to defend my turf. No, you can't touch my database.
So where do you think this confusion around DevOps is just about automation? Where do you think that comes from?
I wish I knew, because I'd go and find that place and I'd destroy it, because it's probably the bane of my life. It's the hardest thing, that terrible preconception. But also there's enough tool vendors out there who are sort of singing the praise of DevOps. They're using DevOps as a way of helping to advertise and market what they do, because it is a buzz movement, and people are then associating DevOps with the tooling rather than the other way around. So we have to be careful. We have to have a very strong message that goes with DevOps to explain that it's not just synonymous with automation or tooling. But it's a very interesting point that Grant raised just a second ago, saying that we have to understand that ultimately we're there together to try and make money for the organization, and it's that shared goal thing that I think that we really need to sort of press home. And the reason being is because it helps to highlight that this is a very different kind of way of working to the original way, the old style way of having different teams that had different goals. So you had your development team, and their goal would be to change stuff and deliver new features, and then you'd have your operations and infrastructure team, and their goal would be stability. So right away you had that kind of change versus stability. That sort of interaction was, and that environment was pretty much at odds. But the reality is that we're both in this together. We need to work together to a shared goal, and these great new tools are really helping us to deliver that. But it's not just about the tools.
Yeah, I mean, when I do talks on this all the time, and the questions come up. It's like, well, what tool do I buy? It's like, well, I mean, after I say Redgate, the actual answer is, the tooling doesn't matter that much. It is about setting up your processes, setting up your infrastructure, setting up your, getting your people on board with the concept, and not just the DBA team or just the development team, but also the management team and the business team, because everybody has to agree that we're going to put some discipline around what we do in order to speed it all up, in order to arrive at automation, right? But it's that discipline first, right? It's the process in support of the people, and then that gets supported by automation.
So how do you get that buy-in? How do you start to create this culture to change and start working in a DevOps way? If it's not just, hey, go buy this tool and plug this in, what have you seen that's worked well out there?
Well, that's the funny thing is tools are kind of like a way in sometimes. So we can, as I say, learn quite a bit from the tools. And again, as Grant said earlier on, it's about breaking down those walls and breaking down those barriers and bridging the gap. And that takes a lot of hard work. So that's not just about getting a tool in and pressing a button. That could be around realigning all of your teams, changing your hierarchy, hiring and firing. So you need a very, very high level buy-in and the right kind of culture to be accepting to this kind of new movement. So that you sometimes need a executive level sort of understanding to be able to instigate these kind of changes. So it can be quite a challenge.
I say get one of these and just use it on people. No.
Here comes the angry.
No, I'm kidding. It's interesting. I just did, I just did a consulting gig at a company to walk through their development deployment processes, and they absolutely recognized that they had pain, right? That they were not delivering high-quality software quickly, and so I was in there to walk through what are your current processes, how do you get stuff done, and then make some suggestions on. Okay, well, so here's what you're going to have to do, and the really interesting part of it is that yes, we're in pain. Yes, we recognize that we need to do change. That we've got to look at, new mechanisms. We've got to modify how we do things, and can we just do all that while doing everything exactly the same way as we've always done it?
Yeah.
No.
With no cost overhead.
Right, and no cost. And so I mean, it's really hard to get people to both accept that the price of eliminating the pain is change, and that there is a cost to doing it. And so, to me, getting people to convince people that they need to do this, one, is getting them to acknowledge that they have that pain in the first place, and not every organization does. Lots do, though. And then second is being really clear with them that, okay, cool, we can eliminate that pain, but it's going to require you guys to change, and there's not any other way around that. You have to change. I can't tell you otherwise. I wish I could, but that's the nature of the beast.
So are companies adapting this? Or is it just kind of some of the big Netflix and Etsy that we hear about, or how well is DevOps being adopted?
Yes, you get 2 points on DevOps buzzword bingo there for Etsy and Netflix, because there are some large companies like that out there with who famously sort of adopted this highly automated and kind of DevOpsy approach to delivering software. But we're not all Netflix, and we haven't all got sort of automation baked into our DNA. So for some people, it's a huge challenge. And there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for DevOps for every organization, which is why you need to tailor the solution for your organization, really. But yeah, there are some fantastic examples out there. We're working with a few clients who are just about to embark on the journey, who are sort of on the sort of the climbing up the foothills of this DevOps journey. I like to think of it, but. And they're going about it all the right way for their organization. Now, the way that one team might do it or one company might do it might be very different. It might be a roaring failure in another organization. But there's so many different ways of adopting it. but yeah, organizations large and small are going on this journey, and they're using some fantastic techniques and tools as well to try and get them there. So as I said earlier on, tools sometimes can be a bit of an enabler, a way in, a way of highlighting the art of the possible. So if you can even enlighten just a few people or just impress people enough to give you the space to try and build upon some of these ideas that the tools are built around, then that might be enough to spark an idea, to spark a movement and get people to buy into this DevOps thing. So the tools really can help. One of the things that we do with DevOps guys is we're very keen to show that these concepts of automation and working in a cross-functional collaborative way can have quick win and good results in a relatively short amount of time in a sort of small scale. And we use those metrics to try and promote it. So we try and sort of fan the flames of small success and build upon that. And that's an approach that anyone can adopt within their organization.
We have a question from Eduardo. Should DevOps goals be the same as company goals? How important is this alignment?
I think your company goals will have a huge impact on what your sort of DevOps goals are. I think your DevOps goals need to be tightly coupled with your IT strategy. So your IT strategy and a lot of the DevOps techniques need to work towards your business goals. So they need to be complementary, otherwise you're just going to be fighting all the way.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add is how important is this alignment? Vital, right? You don't, the last thing you want to do is fight the business, because you'll lose, right? If the business is saying we're going in this direction, and then technology people go, well, yeah, cool, but we want to go over here, it's it's just not going to work. So you really do need to align those two tightly. It's vital. I mean, the one thing another thing I always bring up is business buy-in is vital to these things. Maybe your business doesn't care about how IT delivers. Most of them do. And so, if you say, we're setting up this process, we're going to be doing these things, there might be an initial slowdown in some of the delivery. Make sure that you communicate that to the business, right? Get those guys on board with what you're doing and how you're doing it so that they can see, yes, there was an initial slowdown, but then because we're measuring stuff, we can show you all the benefits that we're starting to arrive at, the improved quality of the code, the improved speed, better communication, better collaboration. The goals of DevOps are to support the business, and so if you just keep that focus in line, you'll be successful. But you have to keep the focus there.
Yeah, it's a bit like an agile adoption as well. So you need both top-down and bottom-up support, and I think right. Mike Cohn speaks about that in his book, Succeeding with Agile, I think it is. But yeah, and it goes into detail about how one approach won't work, but if you have both, sort of the top-down and bottom-up, then you're setting yourself up for success at least.
Right, I agree.
So I really want to start thinking about the database, the title of the webinar today, where is the database in DevOps? And Redgate, we make tools for SQL Server developers and DBAs. So yeah, how does the database?
And Oracle and MySQL.
And .NET and Azure, so yeah. But where is the database in DevOps? How does that fit in?
We don't have one. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that was quick. The webinar's over.
We're done. Everybody go home. It fits in the same way anything else fits in, right? Development is building something that's going to persist data to some sort of storage location, right? What's that storage location? A file. Cool. We're putting in a file. It's a NoSQL unstructured database. Awesome. It's NoSQL database. It's some type of structured relational storage. It's a data warehouse. Any or all of these things are data storage, right? And so the application is building this stuff. Operations has to set up something to support this stuff, and you've got to have communication between these two to create a life cycle that lets it go from development into production and back into development. And it's funny because people talk about a life cycle, but it's much more of a circle, right? It's not this pipeline concept that we used to use all the time. It's very much a circle because support calls come in, oh, this is broken in the database. Well, we've got to go back into development, and then that's going to go back through our process and come back into production. You know what I mean? And just this nonstop continual circle of movement is going on, and databases are right there at the center of it as much as any other aspect. They're not more important, but they're not less important.
Yeah, I mean, they're as important a part of the sort of ecosystem as any other part of the application. They're as important as your infrastructure. They're as important as your website. It's an integral part of your system, really. So sort of saying where is the DevOps where's the database in DevOps is a bit like saying where's your website in DevOps. At the end of the day, DevOps is really about a culture, about a way of working, about best practices, and to a certain extent, and yeah, your database, it fits in there along with everything else. One thing I would say though is that I guess we have a responsibility now that the tools are available to really try and highlight how flexible we can now be in terms of database development. There was quite a big push a few years ago around this kind of evolutionary database design and how databases can work most effectively with this agile methodology. But now I think that we're a little bit beyond that now. Yes, with DevOps, we need to get the right people in the room at the right time, right from the beginning, and we need to be designing solutions sympathetically and with consideration for not just the database or the architecture of choice, or the buzz architecture of the time, but also we need to be thinking about how do we deploy, how do we maintain, how do we roll back, and all of those things. And traditionally, the database has been a bit of a tricky one to fit into that block. That one's always been the sticking point. But now the tools are available, so we don't have to stick our head in the sand quite so much, and we don't have to just hit and hope. So there are emergent trends, there are emergent patterns, and there are good tools out there to support the database.
And the one thing I would add on that, I mean, great points by the way, is a push from the DBA team is going to be necessary to move into a DevOps universe, and that's to support processes that developers have already put in place. Developers have built mechanisms for validating their code before it gets deployed, running through testing before they go out into production. They've got all these mechanisms, continuous integration, continuous delivery, automated testing, and it's mostly, again, process and culture, not any particular tool set, and all of that has to get adopted by the DBA team. It's much more, I think there's a lot more movement required on the DBA side than there is on the development side. Yeah, the developers got, as again, great point, get the DBA in the room at the right time, right, as early as possible, so that you are, I love that phrase, developing sympathetically. Wrote that one down. But, or designing sympathetically. But it's vital that the DBAs recognize that this DevOps movement is a movement from both directions. They've got to recognize that a lot of what developers are doing that's increasing their quality is something the database can do for the same goals, increase the quality, and and then obviously work on collaboration and communication.
So why do you think the database hasn't been included before in some of these development processes like CI and automated testing?
DBAs are jerks.
No. Granted, saying that as a DBA.
I'm saying that as a DBA. Well, come on. What's a DBA's favorite one-word phrase? No.
No.
Right?
And I know that just from working with Grant too long.
It's, we've been sticks in the mud, and I think that that's caused developers to work around us, and that was a mistake. And I'll be really honest, it's a mistake I made. I was a stick in the mud. I caused developers to work around me. I recognized that and got, I got better, but it's I think the biggest thing that's keeping it is the fact that DBAs are jerks. The other issue that comes up that I've seen is that databases are hard, and that's because of data persistence. Code, throw away the old one, put the new one in, we're good to go. I mean, we're done. Database, I can throw away the old one, and then I start getting phone calls, right? So you actually have to keep all that stuff. You can't just throw away the data. You have to have migration scripts. You've got to have all this extra stuff, and frankly, developers kind of go, yeah, here, you guys handle it. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, it's precisely that. Yeah, I think that's entirely where it came from. It was just quite hard to do. We were developing code, and as exactly like you're saying, just kind of tear the old one down and chuck the new one in there, and DBAs would go, can't do that with data. You can't do that with your database. It's just not possible. So in the end, it was a kind of, instead of working together to try and come up with some best practices and some elegant solutions, it was kind of, okay, well, that's really your problem, and I'll just leave it with you. And thankfully now we're somewhere where there are solutions. So we have finally worked together, and it's fairly analogous to the whole sort of DevOps movement right from the very beginning, which was if you sort of replace the ops part with DBA there. So it was like, there was all of these automation tools available, and all of this culture of just letting the computer take the strain going on in dev and in operations. There was this very much a kind of, we don't trust the computers to do these reliable, repetitive tasks. We have to do them manually, and it's been an education, but finally we've got there. And as someone who's been on the infrastructure side of the fence for a while, I've come along with the movement as well, and I've seen the change happen firsthand, and it's been, like I said earlier on, cultural as much as anything else. And I think finally the culture's got there, and now all of these tools are just sweeping in and sort of like taking us by surprise and going, wow, this is really awesome, and that obviously helps.
I think Kenneth brings up a good point, that it's not just about the data that makes the database aspect hard of this, but it's also security concerns around that data and access issues and.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and please everyone, when I say DBAs are jerks, that is partly a joke, right? But not completely. But the fact is that DBAs have a whole bunch of stuff that goes on that makes them say no, right? And security is a huge one. We want a copy of production. No. Well, why? It's 50 terabytes. You can't have a copy, right? We just can't afford it. We want a copy of production. No. Well, why not? Well, legally, I can't give you the patient data for our hospital, right? If I give that to you, I go to jail. So the answer is no. I mean, it's, are we being jerks? Yeah, maybe to a degree, but there are reasons why. I mean, it's not just, that we're not nice people. That's just one of the perks of the job. It's very much around structure that we're doing these things. So, I do use that as a shorthand, but Kenneth is right. There's a whole slew of reasons why the DBAs act as a bit of a slowdown, as a bit of a hindrance for just moving quick.
Yeah, it's also about, you mentioned this earlier on, that sort of the roles and responsibilities, because the DBAs quite often are the guys carrying the pager. They're the guys on pager duty, and the developers typically weren't. So if you've come from that background where you're the guy who's getting called up every time something breaks, naturally you're going to be very reluctant to accept any change, anything that's slightly unusual or anything you don't feel 100% comfortable with. So that's the background that we've come from. So if we'd got that right, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and the developers were all on PagerDuty and they were all supporting every live rollout, not just the rollouts, but the subsequent days and weeks and months afterwards, I think this culture would have developed a long time ago.
Yeah.
Do you see that changing now, James? Where it's not just ops responsible for the pager and getting called in if a deployment doesn't go well.
Yeah, we really advocate that the whole team sort of takes that duty on board as well. We're very big into sort of the eat your own dog food solution, and I'm really keen on banging home that mantra of walk a mile in another person's shoes. So you'll never really truly get to understand the pains of the consequences of your actions, if you will, as a developer, unless you walk in the shoes of the people who have to support your applications in production. So that goes for not only the operations people, but the help desk people, the support people as well. So I'm really keen to advocate things like rotations, secondments and things like that. So get your developers, your testers, your DBAs to spend a couple of weeks or a couple of months even in the support role or in the operations role, and really get to understand the pain points, the ins and outs, and the problems that your actions can possibly be causing.
So I think Dave brings up a really interesting question. We've talked about DevOps and having a separate dev team versus an ops team and how they can work together. And now you mentioned DevOps, DBA, and how all of those work together. But what about in teams where there is no formalized DBA role? I think we sometimes call this the accidental DBA, where it's just kind of the developers that are responsible for the database. How does DevOps work in teams that don't have a DBA?
Well, I mean, DevOps, as I say, is sort of a collaborative team effort. So if you don't have a distinct role of a DBA, then my first question would be who is making those sort of the architectural and design decisions around your database, around your application. If it's a collaborative effort, if it's a team effort, then you're doing as good as what I would suggest. So making sure that you're making the right decisions and making the right design choices is probably paramount in that world. And somebody's going to be wearing that DBA hat at some point. In the DevOps environment, we strongly recommend that the DBA is involved within the team, embedded within the team. So rather than have a DBA team, you would have a DBA within the team. It may not be a full-time DBA within the team. The same as with a build engineer or a release engineer or something like that. Have one possibly servicing 2 or 3 teams, but certainly have one who's there in your daily stand-ups, in your planning sessions, and all of the rest of it. Developers making sure that they're considering the right design choices, and from a development perspective, from a database perspective, then that's okay. It's not the end of the world.
And I mean, and to Dave's question again, the no formalized DBA, that's fine, whatever. I mean, right, the tasks associated with a DBA still have to get done. So there's a server that has to get set up somewhere by someone. There's databases that have to get built and deployed somewhere by someone. Backups are going to have to get set up by someone, right? And further, the interesting thing about the DBA role, and it's not so much that when things are rolling along that you need a DBA, right? Building a database is simple. Putting in a few tables is simple. Getting the data in there is simple. Hooking up the applications is simple. Off you go. Great. You don't need a DBA. Hey, guess what? Server just went down. Anybody have any idea why? Anybody have any idea what to do? Okay, great. Now developer X, he spent a little more time, or she spent a little more time doing this, so now she has got to do the restore. Has she ever done a restore before? No. Well, she's going to learn that. Now she knows how to do a restore, and none of the other developers do. Guess who is becoming a DBA, even if you never give the term, right? You don't have to use the term DBA to be a, quote, DBA. If you're doing the role, you're doing the job.
I had a question from Vinod asking about how often should a DevOps database be backed up?
I mean, so you could take the word DevOps out of that question, and it's the same question. A DevOps database is just a database. It's there is no such thing, particularly as a DevOps database. A database that's been developed sympathetically to your DevOps goals, perhaps. How often should it be backed up? However often your business case needs you to back it up. There's no right answer to that question, unfortunately.
Right, and it really comes down to you guys identifying your recovery point objective and recovery time objective, and that's a whole different discussion. But write down RPO, RTO, look those up on Google, Vinod, and that'll start driving you down the right path. So RPO, RTO, those are your two words.
Great. Grant's giving homework. We have a question from Kenneth about, is a smaller I team easier to implement DevOps?
So the smaller an IT team, the easier it would be to adopt DevOps. On pure mathematical scale, yes, probably, because you've only got 10 people to convince. No, I suppose that you could, this question could sort of go into the scalability of DevOps, and I think that's quite a big question to answer. But generally speaking, I don't think it's necessarily the size of your IT team. You can see IT teams, large organizations with IT teams of hundreds of people, breaking down those into smaller product teams. Now that's our favored sort of, not framework, but I guess our favored structure for being successful with both Agile and DevOps. So if you've got smaller delivery teams and product teams that are cross-functional, it's easier for those guys to work together in a collaborative kind of way, make the design decisions that suit them the best. So I think in that sense, that unit, that collaborative team is the most important part of the puzzle. So you could have a ginormous IT team, but with smaller delivery teams within it. What's the ideal size for that? That's probably there's probably not a right answer for that, but I would dare say probably not more than 15 people or something like that per team. I know what's the odds. It's the 2 pizza team, isn't it, or something like that?
Right.
If your team's too big for 2 pizzas to feed, then it's too big. Yeah.
Or they're really hungry.
We're working really late, yeah.
Malnutrition.
So what are some of the best and worst practices you've seen around databases when teams are going through this DevOps transformation?
Well, let me give one, because it's a bugaboo for DBAs, and it was an ORM implementation. Not that ORM implementation is bad, it's that an improper implementation of ORM within a DevOps process can be bad, very bad. But ORMs can also be implemented extremely well, and it really comes down to, are you doing ORM or are you doing OOM? If you're doing ORM, which is object to relational mapping, awesome. If you're doing object to object mapping, in other words, you're taking the DevOps approach of devs are taking over ops, and you're trying to eliminate the DBA and trying to eliminate the database because now you've got this new tool that fixes everything. Those have been wildly unsuccessful in my experience. But I've also worked with teams that said, hey, we're going to implement this, but We recognize that we need the database, that we're writing to a database. How can we best implement this and bring in a DBA to say, look, we're doing this, but how do we do it right? And then the DBA, says, well, okay, here's, 98% of that stuff is awesome, but this 2% over here is really horrible. Can you hand me that 2%? You guys take the 98% and run. And that's been a very successful process. But again, what's it come down to? Communication and collaboration. The whole DevOps thing comes back to that. So if you've got DevOps, following communication and collaboration, this ORM style implementation should be successful. If you're not following communication and collaboration, you can dig deep, dark holes.
James, anything you've seen around best practices?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and answer this one and not really talk about the database at all, in actual fact, because the best implementation that I've seen has been on a DevOps transition, on a DevOps journey, has been to forget the technology completely and start by educating everyone within your organization, certainly within your sort of IT department, about what DevOps is, what is this new culture that you're going to want to adopt. Try and get people all enthused about it, and then start to build these teams. Build the right teams with the right people in it, and that includes DBAs. So getting the DBA and the team right from the very beginning, getting their buy-in, making them feel part of the process. Don't ostracize, really bring them on as part of the journey. So getting that right from the outset has been what I would say is about the best, most successful practice I've seen. And only then do you start talking about, okay, how do we start to build software? How do we start to design this stuff? What tools do we need to bring in? What practices like automation do we really need to really invest in? So those are secondary concerns. So the first one is about the people and building the teams. So that's the best practice I've seen. On the other flip side, it's been about how do we automate application delivery. And yeah, the database is too big. It's like 20 terabytes. There's not much we can do about that. We're going to continue to obviously just keep deploying stuff at the most breakneck speed that we possibly can, but the database is a lost cause. That's probably the worst implementation that I've seen. It was almost as if, we'll try and accelerate where we can and ignore that great big blocker in the corner there and do the opposite of what the theory of constraints teaches you.
I think you've touched a little bit on Vinod's question about the first steps to implement DevOps, and you talked about that, educating the team and realigning the team, restructuring the team, but he actually asked how do you do this on an already deployed application and database? So, when you're not working on something brand new from start, any advice there?
I certainly still think that the principles that still apply. You need to build a cross-functional team that's going to support that product or that application, and not sort of treat it as something that's going to be thrown over the fence to somebody else. So if you've already got a product or an application that's sitting out there in production, it's causing pain. It's perhaps a bit of a problem to maintain or deploy or something like that. Then you need to work out what your constraints are. You need to have a look at what your goals are to start off with. If we want to be able to deploy this thing reliably, rapidly, and repeatably, then what are the things that are getting in my way? And try and isolate those and work on those as part of a drive to make your application more operable, more maintainable. So these sort of non-functional requirements become raised as sort of as important as features. So deployability as a feature and maintainability as a feature, and all of those things that stop you from delivering your application in a rapid and reliable way.
Yeah, I really kind of just have to agree. I mean, it's start with the team, right? Get the team lined up, get the team agreeing that, whatever bridges, gaps, or walls that we have right now, we're taking those down, So the devs are stepping into the ops area somewhat, the ops are stepping into the dev area somewhat, and we're going to start to communicate and collaborate. And a lot of people will say, well, yeah, of course we communicate and collaborate. Whenever I throw this over the wall, I let the DBA know it's coming. Okay, so we need a little more than that.
It's a heads up.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we're deploying on Friday. It's Thursday, dude.
That is useful as shouting incoming.
Yeah, exactly. It start with the team, Vinod. Start with the team, and then work on the process, and just make sure that the process is always in support of the people, but that the people are going to follow the process. It's process. It's people over process, absolutely, but it's not people instead of process. You've got to have both. So start with the people and then work on your processes.
Yeah.
So in our
one thing I would say that sort of goes it goes a bit of hand in hand with that sort of focus on the people thing is if you had two teams, one team that was building and supporting its application that ran in production, and another team that just built it and then threw it over the wall to another team that operated and ran it in production. Which team do you think is incentivized the most to build the highest quality software? Well,
yeah, done.
So we have a few minutes left before we get into our demo. Just one key thing that you'd like attendees to take away today about DevOps in the database, James? Or Grant, whoever wants to start.
Yeah, the risk. The risk of sounding like a stuck record, it would be that it's about the people and the process. Learn from the tools and make the tools useful to your objectives. But start with the people, get them aligned, get your processes aligned, and use the tools as the accelerator.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say that don't be afraid, right? Dive into DevOps, especially as a DB, since we're talking databases to a degree and talking to DBAs to a degree, adopt the word yes, right? Yes, we'll get you a copy of production, but it's going to be a clean copy. Yes, we're going to implement ORM, but you're going to let me, do some investigation around the side. Don't be scared of this. Dive into it. Embrace it, right? It's coming anyway, so just get out in front of it and be excited about it and take part in it. You're going to enjoy the process better, and it's going to help you implement it better with your dev teams. So don't be afraid. Get excited about it. This is fun stuff.
Great. Well, thank you guys for all your questions. If you have any more questions, please continue to type them in. We can answer them at the end or get back to you afterwards. But we're just going to jump over to Tuberg from the DLM Automation Suite team to have him give us a quick demo on the DLM Automation Suite. Hi, Tuberg. We can't hear you quite yet.
Yeah, you might be muted.
There you go. Oh, no, that was Grant.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, cool.
And we can see your screen, your SQL Server Management Studio.
All right. Cool, let me change this. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Tuğberk Uğurlu. I am part of the DLM automation team, and as you can understand from the name, we are building the automation tools which will make it easy for you to have your DLM journey go smoothly. So today I'm going to be demoing a simple flow of getting your database from a developer's machine, from the source control and then to the production server, seeing how that would go in a typical scenario, which is going to be a very simple case here. So what I have here is I have my development database here. It's about British proverbs. So it's a simple application. So I have made some changes, and I have committed them, but I haven't pushed them yet to my GitHub repository. So I'm doing it now, pushing it to my GitHub repository, and then you can see that I made my changes, and all of those changes are here now. So what I also have is I also have my CI server set up ready. So now, now it's going to take this changes that I have just pushed to my repository and then start building it. It will take a while for it to kick in, but after that it will run my build steps that I have defined there. So if we wait for it enough, it will give us a green build hopefully, and then I will see some of the output which is coming from the this build. So one of them is actually I'm also building my application here inside my TeamCity, and I'm also using a tool called SQL CI to build my database schema here. So it ensures that my schema is in a correct shape, and then it gives me a thumbs up saying that you are good to go now. I can optionally run some tests, but this is just a personal project, so I don't have any tests here. And then what I also do here at the end is I'm also creating a release by using a tool called SQL Release. It's also part of the DLM automation suite as well. So here, what I do is I just run new database release PowerShell commandlet to create a release for me, and it does that by comparing the scripts folder which is inside the source control and then to the target database which I define inside my parameters. And then at the end of the day, it just gives me some artifacts, and one of those artifacts are actually the changes report. And I also configured TeamCity to surface it to me in a nice way so that I can see that. So here what I see is that I have a report for my release, and I'm seeing a warning here because that I am doing some bad things to my database now, which will cause me to lose some data potentially. So it warns me about that at the very beginning of the report. And maybe it's an important thing, maybe it's not, but it comes down to this DevOps thing that you are seeing this and you need to work with the team, development team, to ensure that it has been the right choice here. And then I can see some changes here. So for example, one of them is that I'm dropping a column inside my visits table, and I'm adding a new table now, which is called feedbacks. All good to go. I mean, we can say that this is something good to go. So what we can do now is to promote this to another step, which will deploy our database to production. But before that, we can look at the DLM dashboard, which is another product that you can use to keep track of changes. So here, what I have is I have my development database, and I have my let me get this away somehow, if I can manage that. Sorry guys. So here I have defined my databases. I have a pipeline for my British Proverbs application, and my development database is now marked as British Proverbs 0.14. This is marked because of the fact that in my build steps, what I have is, if I go to SQL CI build step, I'm saying that whenever you build a package, let the DLM dashboard about it, and then it lets the DLM dashboard about the schema, and the DLM dashboard sees that and marks your state as a known state by giving you an orange rather than a red drifted flag. So I can review that, I can say that I'm happy with it, you can acknowledge that, and then you go green now. But the others are still on different schemas now. So what I will do is I will just come here to my build, and I will choose to promote it to deploy database to production build configuration now. So now it will do the deployment for me by using the same release which has been created in the previous step. So it's not actually creating the release again by comparing two things. It is using the same artifacts because you may have a drift in the middle, and SQL release will detect that as well. So now if I come here, I will see that the production is now in the near state as well. So I can also review that. I can see the changes here, and I can acknowledge that changes if I want to. So this is just a simple case here, but the tool that I use here is TeamCity, but it doesn't matter really which tool you are using. It can be just TFS, it can be another CI server like Jenkins, or what we can do is you can go beyond this and then have a CI server and release management tool like Octopus Deploy running side by side, and then they can communicate to each other. And then you can use CI on your CI server, and then the SQL release on your release management tool to do the releases and record the releases. So that's all I'm going to be showing you today. I hope it was helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I haven't seen any questions come in, but if you guys have any questions for Tuberg, just let me know. Thanks, Tuberg. So he was showing you again how you can integrate your database into a CI and CD process.
With no tests.
That is a good point, right? So it's great that it's being built, but it's always nice to have those tests to make sure what you're deploying is correct. I did like that manual intervention and getting those warnings on the drop of data loss, which goes back to what we were talking about later, that you can't just drop the database and replace it, and you need to be concerned about anything that would cause data loss.
I mean, that's one of the classic scenarios as well. You know, if you're renaming a column or something like that, you know, the tool itself is just going to drop that column and do a sort of do the rename as if you're dropping. Well, it would do it in two transactions. It drop the column and then recreate it with a new name, and you'd lose all your data. But now, you know, there's almost no workaround for that. But we know what's going on there as developers because we've written that code, and now we've got the tools that will help us bring that to light. So it will say, right, look, it looks like this is what you want, and it looks like this is what the database is going to do. So brilliant. It's about highlighting this stuff to people, and people can then go and have that conversation.
Great. If you guys think of any more questions after this webinar, please email us at dlm@redgate.com, or just email us if you want to get in touch, if you want to learn more. We have all kinds of free webinars, articles, and all Redgate tools. What you saw today is available for a free trial at redgate.com/products/DLM. DLM, again, is Database Lifecycle Management. Redgate also offers one-day training workshops on how to get your database into source control, how to do continuous integration and automated tests for your database, and also automating your deployment process so you can make it repeatable, reliable, you know, just a click of the button, but still getting DBAs involved to have that review. So you can find more about that at redgate.com/training. We also offer a DLM health check, which is a consultancy service through Redgate certified partners to come in, look at your current processes, and kind of give you some helps with next steps and, you know, help you with those pain points. We're also available to follow us on Twitter at Redgate or at DevOps Guys. I want to thank James and Grant for their time. It was really great talking to you guys today, and
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your insight.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, afternoon, and we'll be sending the email with the link to this recording shortly. Bye.